Like, he should have had a come to Jesus moment, you know, but he didn't. He kept going, and she just exterminated a cockroach in my eyes.
Welcome to episode 108 of Generation Film, the podcast where two guys from the 20th century select a classic movie to show a panel of young filmmakers and see if it still plays for today's generation. I'm Mark Netter. I'm a filmmaker and instructor at Los Angeles Film School and co-founder and CEO of Electric Cast Media. And here's my co-host.
I'm David Tausik, and here I am.
I am Grace Chapman, and I am a student at the Los Angeles Film School and an aspiring screenwriter.
Hi, I'm Jake Flowers. I'm also a student at the Los Angeles Film School, and I am an aspiring image consultant.
Hi, I'm Guy Lewis. I'm a student at the Los Angeles Film School, and I like movies.
All right. This past week, we watched the 1991 female buddy crime road movie, Thelma and Louise, directed by Ridley Scott and written by Callie Curry, for which she won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay her first time out. It stars Susan Sarandon, Geena Davis, Harvey Keitel, Christopher McDonald, and features Brad Pitt in his breakout role. Give you guys a little synopsis. Best friends Thelma, a vivacious housewife suffering under a chauvinistic husband, and Louise, a single waitress with a disillusioned view of the world, take off on a fishing trip together. But everything suddenly changes when Thelma is sexually assaulted by a man she's flirted with at a bar, and Louise shoots him in anger, sending them on the run from the law through the stunning landscapes of the American Southwest. Along the way, they face numerous setbacks as they grow stronger together, driving to an inevitable showdown with the authorities and straight into cinematic legend. How was that as a synopsis?
Love it.
That was good.
So, two of you saw this movie for the first time. I am going to start with Jake. Was this your first time seeing any of the movie, or had you seen part of it?
It was my first time watching it at all.
And what was your initial reaction, and how do you feel today, a few days later?
Well, obviously, I loved it. If you're watching, you can see. I loved it. I love female-led films. All my favorites are, besides my Westerns that I love. But yeah, I loved it. Still loving it. Gonna watch it again soon.
Guy, how about you? This is your first time seeing it?
Yeah, like I've seen clips of it, but I never sat and watched it all the way through.
And what was your feeling when you saw it this time, and how are you feeling today?
I thought it was great. The shots, a lot of the dialogue was really authentic and rich and realistic. And then there's a bunch of funny parts in there that weren't really supposed to be funny parts, but they're funny parts.
I think a lot of it's supposed to be funny. I think it actually is interesting kind of combination. I mean, the only thing I didn't say there was comedy. It's kind of a comedy as well as being a little bit of a noir. I mean, it jumps around with genres.
You ever see the original trailer? You know, they sell it as a comedy.
I just watched it before this. I was curious.
The trailer's an insult, because the trailer basically is like, they're having fun, wacky chicks on the road. And the movie is so much better than that. So, Grace, I really want to go to you because you've seen this before, and you're the one woman on the panel here. And this obviously is a female-centric film. It's directed by a man, but surprisingly, he didn't seem to sand off the edges of the female-written screenplay. So what's your history with Thelma and Louise?
I watched it probably 10 years ago with my mom. And I remember just bawling my eyes out. Both of us were just crying watching it. She'd seen it before, and she put it on for me. And it was just so amazing. And I knew I'd seen it before, but I didn't remember a lot of stuff that happened. And so watching it again, it was like seeing it for the first time, even though I knew what was going to happen and all the big moments.
What was it this time that you hadn't remembered that struck you particularly hard?
I don't remember Daryl. I don't remember any of the men except Brad Pitt, honestly. But I didn't remember Daryl being such a chauvinist, like you called him. So that really added to the character.
I think the scene that's stuck in my head is when Thelma robs the liquor store. I don't know. It was just so funny and badass to see the CCTV footage of her reciting word for word what Brad Pitt's character says. when he robs places, and it made me want to like rob a liquor store or pretend to, I don't know.
Well, one of the things that I think is really amazing about the script is that the women start off in a certain place where Louise is obviously the hard-bitten one, and she's been through a lot, and Thelma is very naive. And Thelma screws up twice in the story, but Louise kind of collapses after the second time, and Thelma gets her act together. Now, is it because she just had sex with Brad Pitt that she seems to be like smartened up?
I think she's having this awakening where she's finally able to express herself, and she has all of this pent up energy in her, and she's ready to do something about something instead of sit there and cry like maybe she has in the past. So she sees herself in Louise and she's like, dude, get up, let's go. We can fix this.
And I can tell you that scene you're talking about, where first you see her running out to the car saying, drive, drive, drive. And then you see the footage and it calls back to what Brad Pitt. When I saw that in the theater in 1991, that was one of the two big laughs in the movie.
So funny.
The other big laugh, tell me if this worked for you guys watching it at home. When they call into Daryl and Louise is warning Thelma, okay, if he sounds at all doesn't sound normal in any way, just hang up, because it means they're trying to trace the call. And she calls up and he goes, Thelma, hi, Thelma. And she goes,
click.
He knows.
Theater exploded.
I love that.
The funniest scene in this movie to me was when all the cops were watching TV at Daryl's house. And he was standing in the background with the remote. He just turns the channel in the middle of the scene just to mess with the cops. I died. I watched that like 3 times. I had to stop, rewind it, and that's I love that scene. And then the scene where they confront Harlan, and then the scene where they confront the truck driver.
Yeah.
I was going to say that.
Those two scenes together kind of had like a opposite
kind of bookend the experience for them.
Yeah. So like they were out of control in the first one, but after they've been on the road together all this time, and then now they're able to be more in control with the situation with the truck driver. I thought that was really, really cool and interesting.
Grace, you said you were going to mention that scene in particular?
Yeah, just because he had been harassing them for so long on the road. And that was one of the big scenes I remembered from the first time I saw it. I always thought it was so funny because I kind of want to do that to some like disgusting men. But it's just a really great scene. And how could you forget like the giant explosion?
It's kind of their last triumph, right? Before they're hunted down. And the other thing too, I don't think it's an accident. That truck is the biggest phallic symbol in the movie, and they blow it up.
The characters are different after the scene where Thelma is in bed with Brad Pitt. And the whole tone of the movie changes. Before that, everywhere they go, you just see trucks, loud crop duster planes. There's factory machinery. It's all these horrible male symbols that make the world ugly. And then once that scene is over, after that, it's all picturesque. It's quieter. They're out in the Southwest with beautiful scenery, and everything is different.
That's so true.
Kind of becomes a Western after that. David, did you have a particular scene that stood out to you?
You know, every time you see Daryl, every time you see Harvey Keitel, all these side characters have great, great moments in the script. And of course, the two leads, Thelma and Louise, have lots of great scenes too. I don't really have one favorite. What I noticed was how the film was put together, how Ridley Scott used all these symbols, these trucks. Maybe it's because we just watched Hitchcock, because it seemed a little like that. All the background little things sort of fit in. To me, it's a very untypical Ridley Scott movie, because that's not what he's about. Usually he's about incredible production design and big set pieces. And this was more about characters and a mood that he sets.
Yeah.
If you look at the shots that they did, there's a lot of moving car shots. You see the actual car on the road, tires rolling, background going. That is, kind of pricey. It's really expensive and hard to do. Also, it didn't look like there was a lot of rear projection done. Like I didn't see a scene where I thought that was happening.
They used 4 cars. They had 4 of those Thunderbirds, all identical. And so, one for putting the camera in, one for shooting, and, so Scott is good at that kind of thing. He shot a lot of car commercials and he knows how to do those logistics.
And also Susan Sarandon and Geena Davis were given both driving and shooting lessons prior to making the movie during pre-production.
Dang.
They didn't know how to drive before?
Good.
I think they didn't know how to drive like at the level they needed to for like the movie, I have to say, I noticed what Guy did as well. Like, I kept thinking, like, is there any rear projection here at all? There were a couple shots I thought might have been.
Yeah, there was one where I think Louise was driving and the road behind her was like, she looked like she was switching lanes a million times, but maybe she actually was because it didn't look fake or anything.
I know that's what you're talking about too, but if it was rear projection, they totally fooled me.
Grace, was there another scene that you wanted to mention besides the one that Guy hopped on?
I guess all the Michael Madsen scenes. I forgot he was in this movie, and it was really nice to see him as a nice guy for once, so I don't feel bad about being attracted to him.
Well, he does clear the table in anger at one point.
That's true, but
you don't get the sense that he betrayed them, right?
No, not at all.
I don't know. He did talk to the cops.
Well, I mean, he didn't know anything.
He didn't say where she was going, just gave her the money. They got found out from JT, which is the Brad Pitt character.
Right.
And he was also super worried about her. So he probably was kind of thinking maybe they could bring her back or something.
Doesn't it feel like he jetted in from like Quentin Tarantino world?
Yes. And
that's the thing. Yeah.
I thought the exact same thing with Harvey Keitel. Also, I just thought it felt like such a Tarantino film in some ways.
Well, Michael Madsen and Harvey Keitel were in Reservoir Dogs next year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when did True Romance come out? Because that was a script by Tarantino that Ridley Scott's brother, Tony Scott, directed with Brad Pitt in it as well as a stoner.
By the way, my first ever use of Google while we're doing this podcast, there was some rear projection. So there's one rear projection scene where Thelma and Louise they're bouncing up and down. It's clearly rear projection. And then I'm thinking about the very last scene, the one that's here behind me. I don't know who's in that car. Either it's crash test dummies and it's real, but probably it's rear projection.
So I want to pick up a particular scene. It was interesting. I was watching it and my son came in the parking lot scene at the end of Act 1 that really makes the story happen. Just a setup. Thelma's been feeling her oats. She's been in the bar. She's been flirting with a guy who I think we suspect immediately. Louise certainly suspects there's something off about him. And they get out in the parking lot and basically he starts raping her. And Louise comes out with the gun that Thelma packed, holds the gun up, frees Thelma, but she doesn't shoot the guy until he says, "Suck my dick," right? And then he gets the bullet. I swear in the theater, nobody thought that she was wrong. That's a huge, huge cinema history scene because leading up to there, it is the fun movie. It is the fun girls getting away from the husband, getting away from the boring life, out on the road. And my son did not leave after that. He stayed and watched the entire thing. Yeah. And I just, wondered, especially for those of you seeing it for the first time, what did you think when Louise took her shot?
I was like, damn, I want to do that one day. No, I think the heat and the tension and the pressure of the moment when the assault was happening, I was like, we're not expecting that level of intensity from this film. So leading into the murder, I was like, she better kill him. If she just walks away and doesn't shoot him, I'm going to be pissed. And then she shot him and I was like, you go, girl. And then I was like, wait, what the hell? She just killed him. It took me a minute. And then I realized, okay, now they're going to be running from the law. They're not just going on a girls trip.
Guy, did you have a similar reaction? Or
so there's like what people would do. And then there's like the law, right? So if she'd have shot him while Harlan was on top of Thelma, in my book, personal book, that's fine. You know what I'm saying? And even when she shot him later, That's still kind of cool in my book. But but the fact that she didn't shoot him right away in the eyes of the law made it not the self-defense in the defense of others, but made it something personal. And I don't think she shot him because he was on top of Thelma. I think she shot him because of Texas.
Because of Texas.
Yeah.
Because of her past.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things the movie does so brilliantly is they tell you just enough of Louise's past without telling you everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is the moment where she seals her fate, right? It is the moment. Now, in a lesser movie, somehow tricks happen, and at the end, they end up getting away with it and coming back to society as heroes. But this movie is much deeper than that. Grace, what did it feel like to you?
I knew when she didn't shoot him right away, when it could have been clearly self-defense, people would use that as an excuse, like, oh, she's a murderer, or she should go to jail, or like she shouldn't have shot him. But this guy had it coming, honestly, and he could have harmed so many other women. And the fact that she shot him after makes a lot of sense to me, because she was trying to be the good person and give him a chance. You know, she got her friend safe. That was what she wanted. So she backed off. But he had to keep going. Like, he should have had a come to Jesus moment, you know, but he didn't. He kept going, and she just exterminated a cockroach in my eyes.
Yeah.
She basically kills him for disrespecting her. I mean, ultimately for disrespecting women.
It's a great trick the film pulls off, because they can't go to the police
Exactly.
because of that. And that's what you need.
Okay. So this is a great question about the times, right? So that was 1991. Here we are 32 years later. Do you think that that story would be harder to accept, them not going to the police, that there's more consciousness today than there was? Or do you think same thing holds true?
I think it's sadly still the same in many ways. It's just not understood how victims of sexual assault react. A lot of them, even if everything was right, nobody got murdered, they don't want to go to the police to report it, just because there's still so many things people don't understand about the psychology of victims. But it is interesting because there are parallels from like now and during 1991. Brett Kavanaugh, when he was nominated to the Supreme Court, he was facing sexual allegations. And in 1991, that was when Anita Hill testified before Congress about her sexual harassment she experienced from Clarence Thomas. And he was just about to be confirming his seat in the Supreme Court. So very interesting parallels.
Don't you get the sense that Louise, whatever happened in Texas, she probably went to the authorities or tried to have something done about it, and nobody listened to her. And so that's why she says going to the cops is a waste of time.
Maybe it was a cop.
Yes.
Oh, shit. That's amazing. There's something about it where the movie is able to hold the drama and the real life feeling of that, but still feel movie-ish in the sense of the enjoyment that you get as the story goes on. And I just think that balancing act is just unreal. I mean, it's exuberant at times.
Yeah, it had everything that movies at the time had it, at that time.
You even think that Brad Pitt's character, JT, is going to turn out to be a good guy because he's an outlaw like them, right?
Yeah.
He's just like all the rest.
His name is JD, by the way, which
JD,
which I think, I don't know if it stands for juvenile delinquent, but it could.
I love that. Changing my name to JD.
Guy, can you say anything about the reception of the movie?
Oh yeah, so it did 43 million from 1991 to 1993 total, with a budget of 16 million. When I found that out, I couldn't really believe where it went. How much that money was spent. But then I watched the movie and then saw where all the money went. I guess I was kind of looking for that, why it cost so much, other than the big name actors and actresses.
Jake, you did a little research on Callie Curry, the screenwriter.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about Callie?
I guess in the beginning of her career was a music video line producer for bands like Motley Crue in the 80s. And she was just having a really tough time because she felt like that wasn't her scene. And there was just a lot of drug use and crazy shit going on. And she was like, I've had enough of this, dreaming about something bigger. But she felt like everyone and their mom had a script to show off. And she, earlier in her life, had met Pam Tillis, who was a country music singer.
Yeah.
And they hit it off early on, and they became this like power duo friendship. And she said she really drew on that friendship with her for this script. She described it as they're very different, sort of like Thelma and Louise. But when they came together, it was this like completely different scenario. So Pam really helped her develop the script and helped her to get the confidence to start pitching it. And she just got turned down left and right. I think Pam was the one who connected her to Ridley Scott somehow. And she was afraid at first to let Ridley take the script on because she was afraid that it would lose the feminine edge that it needed. And it was her original idea. And it was just like her brainchild. And he really did it justice, she said, and honored her vision. And yeah, she won the Oscar for it. So
First time out, not bad, right?
Mm-hmm. And she said it was a whirlwind. Like it happened so fast. He was basically gave her a call and was like, you can shop this movie for the rest of your life and eventually make it as an indie film, or we can make this movie right now. And she was like, holy shit. And it happened.
And she went on to create the show Nashville 20 years later or something like that. But
yeah, she spent the beginning part of her life in the Midwest and in the South. So I think a lot of her aesthetic is pulled from that.
yeah, and the fact that there's no one else with writing credit on it, didn't go through the Hollywood mill of rewriting or softening the edges. But, you know, Ridley Scott, for a man, has a pretty good reputation as far as dealing with women. And David, maybe that can give you an opening to pick up with some background on the director, Ridley Scott.
He's been around for a long time. So he started directing and doing production design for British TV back in 1962. And I formed Ridley Scott Associates, which is this unbelievably successful commercial advertising firm. I started that in 1968, and he's still directing today. He has Napoleon coming out this November, and he'll be 86 when the film comes out.
Oh.
And he has another film scheduled for his 87th birthday, Gladiator 2, that he's started filming already. His first feature was The Duelists, and it won Best Newcomer at Cannes. So good start. And then his second film was Alien, and that was just a knockout, both critically and commercially. It just, and culturally, it just was a big thing. Scary as hell.
But also with like a super strong female protagonist. That was unusual for the time.
It was unusual. And interestingly enough, the writers, they only used last names. So everyone in the film had a last name, didn't have a first name, and their gender was never actually specified in the script. So Ridley Scott decided that the main character should be a woman, and he cast Sigourney Weaver to play Ripley. She had never had a significant part in a film before, and the rest is history. Her career was made by it. And after the huge success of that, he got a lot of money to make Blade Runner, a really great science fiction film that at the time was a tremendous critical and financial flop. Roger Ebert hated it. Pauline Kael hated it. All the critics hated it. It didn't make much money, but it was great. And then after that, he started making some pretty disappointing films. He made Legend with Tom Cruise, which I don't think is very good, personally. He made Someone to Watch Over Me. Yeah, there were big disappointments. He made Black Rain. That was a mixed bag. Very beautiful looking film, but not up to the standard of the first two hits that he had. And then he was going to produce Thelma and Louise, and he was just supposed to be the producer. They made a list of 40 directors to offer it to, and Scott actually went and offered it to 4 different directors. And each one of them responded by saying, yeah, we got to do something about these female characters. I don't get a good feeling about it. We've got to tone it down. They're not likable. Pre-production took too long. So Michelle Pfeiffer dropped out, and there were a lot of casting choices they had. I think Goldie Hawn and Meryl Streep were going to do it together, but they decided to do Death Becomes Her instead. Michelle Pfeiffer and Jodie Foster were going to be in it, but Jodie Foster had to leave to make Silence of the Lambs. And then we got Geena Davis and Susan Sarandon. Worked out well.
Thank God.
I know, thank God. Geena Davis lobbied for the role for a year, evidently. And by the way, as you can see behind Guy, her husband in the movie, Daryl, who is a comic buffoon kind of asshole, was actually her ex-boyfriend, and she recommended him into the movie.
That's a nice recommend.
Brad Pitt got the role because he was recommended by Geena Davis.
Mm-hmm.
That was because she screen tested against like 4 guys, and she was like, that's the guy.
Right.
Yeah, I watched an interview and she said she was messing up her lines like dumbfounded. She was like, choose the blonde one.
Billy Baldwin was given the role. He dropped out. And then George Clooney and Mark Ruffalo were rejected. And Robert Downey Jr. was cast, but Ridley Scott met him and thought he was too short. So that's when he went with Geena Davis's recommendation of Brad Pitt, who was unknown.
The screenwriter only gave the script rights to Ridley Scott if she could help with the casting and like give her first pick and approve or deny who they chose. And she had like a completely different idea going in. I forget who specifically it was, but it was the worst choices ever. I'm sure Ridley Scott was like, no, we're not doing that.
I read that when she wrote it in 1984, which was 7 years before the film got made, that she was picturing Holly Hunter and Goldie Hawn as the lead. But she wanted to direct it herself as a little independent film, and she didn't expect to get movie stars.
Yeah, I think Goldie Hawn would have been great, but I'm glad that it was who it was.
I want to talk about the chemistry between the two actors. It is one of the rare times that two actors from the same movie have both been nominated for a Best Actor or Best Actress role, and both Geena Davis and Susan Sarandon got nominated for Best Actress.
It's the last time that happened, by the way, that two actresses in the same movie both got nominated.
In the same category.
In the same category, right.
Yeah. And there is something so magical about their relationship in this movie. I think, Grace, maybe you can speak to this. What it says about female friendships and the ups and downs and being able to roll with the punches together and lift each other up. Is that part of what resonated with you and made you get weepy when you watched the movie?
Yeah, the movie really discusses how female friendships are more important than like the fleeting men in your life. And even though Louise has a really good relationship with her guy, Jimmy, she even tells Thelma, like, he's not an option, like, it's you and me. And it's just like an unbreakable bond to have a good female companion because you don't have to worry about what you look like or saying the right thing or fitting in. You just know that they'll always have your back. And watching it with my mom was like really special. And I didn't cry this time. I watched it with Jake. I didn't cry this time, but I watched the extended cut when they deleted the very end when you see the car like go over and then they're like in heaven, I guess, driving away. It made me sob. I was like crying all over again.
Wait a minute. There's a different ending?
Oh, you haven't seen it? Yeah. Instead of it just pausing, it follows it down the canyon and the car kind of flips over. You don't see a crash or anything. And then you see Harvey Keitel running after them and all the cops putting their weapons down and walking over like, oh shit, what have we done? And then the very, very last scene is Thelma and Louise just driving off into the distance. And I think they did the right thing by cutting that out because a lot of people would have been like, they live, but it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
I have a little issue with the ending. And I got to tell you, because when we start getting into the stars system on this, to me, there's two flaws in the movie. Both of these I felt strongly when I first saw it in the theater. This time, the first one didn't bother me as much, but the second one still did. So there's this African-American biker character who shows up out of nowhere just to do a gag that doesn't involve Thelma and Louise, where there's a cop that pulled them over. They've, at gunpoint, put him into the trunk. She shot some bullet holes in for air holes. And this African-American biker, which I called the Rasta biker because he was listening to reggae music, he comes over to the car. Here's the guy inside asking to be let out. And the biker is smoking a joint and he blows the smoke.
Blunt. Big ass blunt.
He's smoking a big ass blunt. And he blows the smoke into the air holes. And everybody in the theater laughed. But I was like,
why?
Well,
It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense.
It's so unnecessary. It is funny, but it did not need to be in there.
So I'm going to make the arguments against and for it. So against it, it's tokenism, right? Guy, you always count Black people in movies, right? And this is, is he the first one?
One.
And it's just a huge
Wait, no,
stereotype.
it was not, because like there was the cop. He was dark skinned, so he could have been any ethnicity. But that's just two, and I didn't see a Black woman at all.
Yeah.
know?
So here's my argument for it, which I felt this time a little bit. Like, yes, it is tokenism, but at least it's saying that there are other people that have been oppressed by the system. And when he blows the smoke in, instead of opening the trunk or helping the cop, we're all kind of like, yeah. So, I mean, again, so that's one of the two flaws that I felt in the movie that for me was kind of keeping it from being perfect. And the other one is about the ending. You know, the ending when the car goes off the cliff and it freeze frames and then it whites out. So whiteout is a really interesting choice as opposed to blackout, because whiteout is more like going to heaven and blackout is more like, you know, darkness and end. So there is a little bit of hope. And it's very similar to the ending of Butch Cassidy. You know, again, two outlaws who end up in a freeze frame where basically it's their demise is what's about to happen. We just don't want to see them shot up by bullets or crashing on the floor of the Grand Canyon. And then they do this thing where very quickly they start a series of gauzy flashbacks to earlier in the movie. And not only does that kind of take you away from this ending where we've just seen these women have like a total psychic bond where they don't say, let's drive off the cliff. Just Thelma says, I don't want to go back. And they are so as one now. They've really come all completely together. They're like one mind. And they've made this decision, and it's such a beautiful moment and a spiritual moment. I think that's part of what makes the movie great, is it's got this sort of intense female spirituality. And then they like kind of ruin it with like, hey, but remember, they were alive and they still look great and all this. And they didn't even have the guts just to play that out and then fade out. They start rolling the credits over those images, which I felt like takes away from the ending of the movie. Am I the only person who feels this?
Now that you say it, definitely, but it didn't bother me when I saw it, but I agree.
Not only that, but the song they chose for the ending.
Yeah.
What the hell is this? It was tacky.
It bothered me because they say, like, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. And then what do? The filmmaker goes back and looks at the nice moments of their life. And to me, that's not what the ending should have been about.
I low-key kind of wanted them to crash. I wanted to see that.
Oh, that's awful.
We should see the car smash.
Look up the deleted scene. It almost gets there.
I'm okay with not seeing them crash. I just want to hold on that spiritual moment where they're up in the air and it's whiting out and you're just like, oh my God, this is legend now. Right?
Well, it's a moment of glory, right? So what I noticed this time was that, you know, it becomes a Western at the end. And Westerns are all about guys going out in a blaze of glory, you know, and their deaths are somehow seen as, you know, like their entrance to Valhalla. They've become part of the great mythic legend of the West. And that's what happens to Thelma and Louise at the end. But I can't think of another film where a woman has had that moment at the end of a film. It's always reserved for men.
Practical magic.
Okay.
We're going to eventually do a practical magic episode. We got to. That'll be introducing it to David and me.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
And I got one other visual observation about the close to the end. You remember when you see that overhead shot of all the cop cars converging on them as they're driving across the desert? They're one car ahead of the cop cars. And I just found out today, I'm not the only person who thinks this. Sperm and egg, perhaps?
Oh, very interesting.
Except the patriarchy is trying to fertilize them with bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit. Damn. I need to think deeper when I watch these movies.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Those are hard to find.
Alien is full of, by the way, these images of the evil monster penetrating people's bodies and trying to penetrate Sigourney Weaver's body. I mean, it's a big theme.
I mean, basically the ending of the movie is the patriarchy drives two women off a cliff, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
So I want to talk a little bit about why this film has endured for so long. And I have to tell you, watching it this time, it was better than I remembered it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was also made me think about how no Hollywood movies today do anything like this movie does.
I was going to say that everything is just like a remake, or they're not willing to take a risk on an original idea. And this was such an incredible brainchild. I wish we would take more risks like this. And also, it just speaks to what's happening in our country today as well. The patriarchy is still ramming us down with our abortion rights being taken away and just more and more rights being stripped away every single day. I think everyone really needs to rewatch this film.
Mm-hmm.
Has anyone read about the reaction that male critics and
I was wondering
other
that.
men had to the film? I remember it at the time, but I was wondering if anyone's really.
Well, there would be articles like, is it anti-men? Is Thelma and Louise an anti-men movie?
Yes, and that's a good thing.
Well, I mean, Harvey Keitel's character, right? He's the balanced character.
And Jimmy.
Yeah.
He was a good man.
They're both somewhat impotent, though. Like Harvey Keitel is super impotent at the end.
That's just men. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
So my son afterwards says, well, what do you think that movie was about? And this is what came to my mind. What does a gal have to do to get her freedom in this damn country?
Mm-hmm.
To be believed when something awful happens, to not have fear, to go to those who are supposed to protect you.
Yeah, to be free enough that if you want to go on a trip, you can tell your husband he's not going to give a shit. Now, obviously, there's a lot of evolution since then. And, most marriages I know are pretty equanimical. But the deep American feeling that this connects to, the value that we all value, is we all value freedom. One of the things we love about America is getting in a damn car and driving across New Mexico, right? Wide open spaces. As long as I'm not hurting anybody, I can do whatever I want, right? I'm not in a communist country. I'm not under a dictatorship, free to do what I want. And so the freedom part of this is so strong. And I think the trick of the movie is they gave the freedom to the women, that this is a woman empowering other women to feel free and to be free. And that's, for some reason, is radical.
Yeah, because almost all Westerns are about that tension between the freedom of the West, but the problem of the law and the lawlessness of the West, and how that gives you freedom, but it takes away freedom. And what's better is always a tough balancing act.
A lot of these stories that stand the test of time are showing you what you want the most, and these two people have it. And you're like, oh, I wish I could have that moment. Mm-hmm. And I think forever and ever, people are going to want to feel the freedom that they had in the T-Bird,
The scene where Louise is looking at the old lady through the window. I thought the scene was really big and no one really talked about it. I just felt like that moment when their eyes met, it was like Louise was looking into the future and the older woman was looking into the past and thinking about their choices.
I kind of felt the same, but I had seen the movie before and I knew that they weren't going to live that long. So I kept thinking that like in the back of my head. But those old ladies really stuck out to me too, because they were also just looking like disgusted at the young women. And I get that look a lot from older women. So I thought it was very interesting to like see that in a film, because I'm always like, am I crazy? But but they also could have known like those are the outlaw girls, and they were witnessing the crime.
And then Louise is going to put her lipstick on,
Louise puts her lipstick on after she has that visual exchange with the woman.
No, she throws the lipstick away.
But she's like, oh, it's not worth it. It's not even worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Those two old women don't make it look really appealing to live to be their age.
Yeah, they look
a good time.
pretty miserable.
Yeah.
You want to stick around in the patriarchy? This is what you get.
Look what it does.
In a diner.
Yeah, they look caged in, because like they're behind a window pane, and it's not just an open glass. It's like the window pane with the T. So like they're kind of like behind bars a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Damn.
I just really thought that scene was like big.
Yeah,
so.
It stuck out to me too.
Yeah, there's something ambiguous about it, and I love that you've had Guy and Grace have really completely different reactions to what's being said in that scene. Because when I was watching it, I was thinking like, are they in solidarity with Louise, or is there something else going on here? And I didn't completely get it. And it really almost felt like a scene from a 70s movie, like an Altman movie or something, where he would always use real people and
Yeah, the lighting was nuts on those ladies.
It was terrifying. Yeah. Grisly. I think another scene that really stuck out to me that I have been thinking about, and me and Grace kind of discussed it right after we watched it, but was the kiss that Thelma and Louise shared at the end. And in my head, of course, I was like, they're gay, you know? And then as I've thought about it later on today, I'm like, I think there's something being said about how relationships transform and they like transcend this binary of sexual or platonic. And the way that you described it really stuck with me as it being a spiritual connection, because like the physicality of the kiss isn't by nature sexual, and it's also not just platonic. It's this other thing where they're like sharing each other's humanity before they die. And it's like not a sexual kiss at all, but it also like could be. I love that it's ambiguous, you know? But I think throughout this entire film was reminding me of these really old sapphic romance novels from like the 1700s, and like this story about women and them being on the outskirts of society. I don't know. I just got a really sapphic vibe from it. But I know all of my queer and lesbian friends really identify with this film, and they're always dressing up as Thelma and Louise for parties, and it's part of lesbian culture. You know what I mean? And so I wonder if that was purposeful.
It was to just further maybe like agitate the patriarchy, you know, because female relationships can be so much more than like a sexual relationship ever can be, because you just, all you want from them is their company. Like your female best friend just wants to be around you. She isn't expecting sex, you know, and it's just like this relief to finally be around somebody that's like, you don't have to worry about that.
I love that.
This film seems like an answer to all those male action buddy films, and they don't kiss. You know, they become really close. Yeah, darn.
Darn.
They don't kiss. In fact, they're usually very stoic. If they're Westerns, all they do is like, you know, give each other a look like, you know, like that's all it takes. And if they're military films, you know, they might salute, and that's like their version of. Right. But women are able to get closer, it seems, in this society, much closer than men, without feeling awkward about it, the way men usually do.
Yeah, I think there's something about the fact that they share that sunrise together, you know, that last sunrise, which is just this beautiful moment that kind of leads into that spirituality and that connectedness. And the other thing I want to say, I mean, we've talked about the lead actors, about Susan Sarandon and Geena Davis already, but my God, like top of their game. Both of them have great performances in their career, but have they ever been better? I mean,
iconic.
I think the acting chops really stuck out to me, especially when Susan Sarandon's in the kitchen at the diner. And her physicality is so perfect, and she knows when to move towards the camera, and she knows when to like swing the door open, and she's smoking. And I don't know, she just has in this film, unlike in her other roles, this physicality that like, you just buy this manic, overworked character from her, and she just lays it down so well.
The scene that got me with Sarandon is the one in the bar where she's watching Thelma kind of crossing the line, and you see so many different things going over her face when she's ordering a drink, and you're with her the whole way. There is a point in the movie where you go with Thelma after the money's gone and Louise crumples, then Thelma kind of takes over. But the way that we're seeing it from her point of view and kind of agreeing with her that Thelma should be a little more careful, but every little nuance, just the little things with her eyes, the way that she would look at a guy like she wasn't interested, like
the script gives her all this depth and all these different ways to feel and all these things that she goes through.
All right, guys, it's time for that big question. How many stars do you give this movie? Now, remember, it's a 4-star system. 4 stars means it's not only an A+ and one of the greatest movies of all time, but has a personal resonance for you. Could go on your top 30 list. 3.5 is an A, and that's for lots of great movies that maybe just don't hit you completely personally. Nothing wrong with a 3-star movie. That's an A-. Then we get to the Bs with 2.5 stars and 2 stars, and we won't worry about the ones below that because we don't bring those movies in front of you guys. So question, I'm going to start with Guy on this one. Guy, how many stars? And besides the fact that I know you recommend all movies to everybody, who would you recommend this movie to?
I always say that everybody should watch every movie out there. But no, if you're female or a woman or non-binary, however you want to say it, and you have a really close friend, it's a friendship movie. It's a buddy flick. So you need to go with your pal. Not 3 or 4, just 2. You and your close friend go watch this movie. It's really, really good. I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. It rocked on so many levels, and it was satisfying. So 3.5.
All right, Jake, you're next.
I feel like I give every movie 4 stars, but because you say top 30, and then I'm like, shit, that's a lot of movies. I really want to give it a 4 because all of my favorite films, like I said, are female led. So I'm just going to go with my gut and I'm going to give it a 4. I think it struck me personally, and I would recommend this movie to Grace, and I would recommend this movie to all of the amazing women in my life, because when I watch this film, I think of them. And I'm like, they need to make like a girl and her gay best friend version of Thelma and Louise.
That would be cool.
Wouldn't that be fun?
That would.
Where one's straight and one's gay?
Well, you don't have to like lean into that. You just show them things.
It's her and her gay best friend, yeah.
The story of me and Jake, basically.
Yeah. Basically remake this movie and make us the leads.
And honestly, that female friendship I was talking about earlier, I feel it with Jake too. Like he's obviously a feminine energy and very present one in my life. Because I don't feel any pressure from Jake.
Well, Grace, you want to be a screenwriter, so...
Yes, I was going to say I'd recommend it to anyone who wants to be a screenwriter. I forget which list it was on, but it's in the top 100 greatest screenplays, and I could see why. It's incredible. I'm obviously giving it 4 stars, and I would also recommend it to any Hollywood bigwigs who are afraid to take a risk on an original screenplay, because this was gold. And then also to sexist men, they need to be warned what will happen.
We'll blow you away.
Shot across the bow, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
David, you're next.
Okay. Always tough. I was prepared to give it 3. Like after I saw it, I said, I'm going to give this one 3. I'd like to give it more, but it's just not up there with the other 3.5 we've done. But I changed my mind. I'm giving it 3.5.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. So first of all, comparing it to other Ridley Scott films, Ridley Scott is an auteur. His films stand out. On the other hand, he's made a lot of really mediocre films and a lot of surprisingly boring films. And if he doesn't get a good script, he doesn't generally make a decent film. When he gets a really good script, he can make a really good film. And he did that here. He's done that a few other times, in my opinion. And that's about it. Other than that, I think they're all 3 stars or less. But this just rises above. This is probably one of his 3 best films. And I think that it has a cultural significance. I remember when it came out, everybody's talking about it. People were doing parodies of it. Even people who didn't like it were talking about it. It had a real effect. And it's just stood the test of time. It could have been made pretty much the same way yesterday, and it would still be a loved film. So 3.5. And I'd recommend it. I mean, my wife loved it. She doesn't love every film that I ask her to see. Clearly, women love this film, but it's not a chick flick in my definition of a chick flick, but it's a film that's very important.
Well, the reason you couldn't quite make this film today is because of cell phones, which have ruined movies.
Yeah.
Because they'd all be tracked immediately and caught before they even made it.
Throw them out the window.
That's true.
Yeah, that scene where Daryl goes out the window is gone.
I'm watching it with my son, and they're feeding coins into the payphone. I said, "Can you believe we used to do this?" And he goes, "No." So here's my take on it. David and I had a conversation about this before I watched it, and I'm like, "Yeah, it's a 3-star movie because of the flaws that I mentioned earlier with the ending, and then with the biker scene." And then I watched it, and I mean, it's a great movie. I mean, even with those flaws, they do not take away from the resonance, thinking about it the next day and smiling. How do you make a movie about 2 women that basically kill a guy, rob a store, drive off a cliff, and we're smiling at the end and filled with love, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I have to say, the performances are so incredible all across the board that to me, it's a 3.5-star movie. If someone told me it's their 4-star movie, like Grace or whatever, totally justified in my mind, because there is something that is personal about it. And I think anyone who really likes movies, who doesn't just go only for sensation, like I'm talking about like special effects. If you like movies about people in any way, this is a great movie for you. It covers different genres. It'll make you laugh. And I think it's so much about America. I mean, I feel like the colors in the movie are red, white, blue, and desert.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the image behind me, it's kind of red, white, and blue, right? Her scarf
Their
is
makeup.
red. Yeah, this is America. This is like a strong, strong feminist statement about America. And there's plenty of assholish complaints about feminism going back to the 1970s. But I mean, this is the fun version of feminism. This is the one where we can all agree and still have a great time.
Real version.
Yeah. All right. I'm not going to be the expert on it, so I won't step into that one. Yeah, but for me, it's a 3.5-star movie. I'd watch it again, and it's great on the big screen, and it worked on the not so big screen too over here. So, bravo, Guy. How do we do?
So overall, we gave Thelma and Louise 3 3/4 stars.
Wow,
that's pretty close.
It's essentially a 4-star, right? Do we round up?
Yeah, I need to go back and find out where we are as far as all the ratings, and so we can like rank them ourselves. It's pretty cool.
All right. If you want to stream Thelma and Louise for yourself, it is currently available on Amazon Prime Video and available for rental lots of other places as well. If you like our show, please tell your friends to rate and review so that others can find us. Generation Film is an Electricast production. Our executive producers are myself, Mark Netter, and Peter Rafelson. Our producer is David Tauzik. Our editor is Marcus Campito. I want to thank my co-host, David Tauzik, and my guests, Guy Lewis, Jake Flowers, and of course, Grace Chapman. Thank you all so much for being part of this. And please join us on our next episode, where we are going to roll back the clock to the Depression era for another politically charged movie by Frank Capra called Meet John Doe. And we're going to see how it plays for a new generation of movie lovers nearly 100 years later here on Generation Film.
Electricast.